Our top stories tonight. Rival parties race across the nation on the final day of campaigning to make their closing arguments in local elections whose outcome is increasingly looking all but certain. Samsung Everland says it will seek an initial public offering early next year, a widely anticipated move seen as the next step in the restructuring of the family-run Samsung Group. And the commander of U.S. forces in South Korea proposes deploying an advanced missile defense system to Seoul to counter Pyongyang's weapons capabilities. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green, red
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다. 한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, 5 p.m. in Singapore, and 6 on Tuesday, the 3rd of June, here in Seoul. Hello, this is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. Today is the final day of campaigning for candidates running in the local elections here in Korea. By this time tomorrow, Koreans will have already cast their ballots and the vote counting will have begun.
Right, the results from tomorrow's local elections are especially important as they will be a litmus test of the Park Geun-hye administration in the wake of last month's deadly ferry disaster. First, here's our Park Ji-won.
The country's rival political parties are engaged in one final push to win the hearts of undecided voters on this Tuesday, the last day of the 13-day campaigning period. These elections are increasingly being seen as a vote of confidence for the Park Geun-hye administration, with last month's tragic ferry disaster hitting the incumbent government hard. The ruling Saenuri Party is calling on the public to give them one more chance to revamp and reform the government in the wake of the disaster.
I earnestly plead with voters to give us strength and another chance so President Park could make a new Korea. Our party, by helping the president, will build a new Korea.
The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is calling on voters to hold the ruling party responsible for the government's poor handling of the tragedy.
The Saenuri Party is already asking us to forget about the Seoul ferry. They ask voters to forget about it and wipe the tears of the president by helping her. We'll never forget the Seoul ferry disaster.
Over 13,000 polling stations around the nation will open at 6 a.m. on Wednesday and close at 6 p.m. More than 11% of eligible voters already cast their ballots in early voting held late last week. Experts say while the young and old vote will be split down their traditional party lines, with younger people supporting the opposition party and the older generation voting for the conservative ruling party, it's voters in their 40s who hold the key to deciding the victor in this year's local elections. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, in the local elections tomorrow, the National Election Commission forecasts voter turnout at 60%. Now, this is 6% higher from last local elections back in 2010.
And with a look ahead to voting day, our political correspondent Ji Myung-gil joins us live. So, Myung-gil, tomorrow is the big day.
Yes, tomorrow Koreans will head to the polls between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. to select nearly 4,000 local administrative and legislative officials. Let's take a look at the most contested regions. According to the most recent opinion polling from last week, the ruling Saenuri Party had the upper hand in 6 regions, while the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy held strong in 5 regions. And in 4 other regions, the rival party candidates were neck and neck. Independent candidates are running close with their counterparts in the city of Busan and Gwangju.
Let's look at the hot zones or the most hotly contested or important battlegrounds.
Well, according to the latest polls that were released on May 28th, Seoul, Incheon, and Gyeonggi-do province are the key battlegrounds since they hold half of Korea's total population and are seen as a stepping stone to the presidential ticket. Incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon held a comfortable lead by more than 18 percentage points against his Saenuri Party rival Chung Mong-jun. In the port city of Incheon, incumbent Mayor Song Young-gil was in a dead heat with his conservative counterpart Yoo Jong-bok, with only a 3.2 percentage point difference. For the governor's seat in Gyeonggi-do province, the Saenuri Party's Nam Kyung-pil held a slight lead with 36%, while Kim Jin-pyo of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy was at 34.7%. In the ruling party's stronghold of Busan, independent Oh Go-don was neck and neck with the Saenuri Party candidate Seo Byung-soo. And in the Liberals' power base of Gwangju, independent Kang Un-tae trailed behind the MPAD's Yoon Jang-hyun by 1.1 percentage points. In the two Chungcheong-do provinces, which are known to be swing regions, the MPAD's An Hee-jung and Lee Si-jung were last seen pulling ahead the ruling party rivals for the governor posts.
Now, Myung-gil, it seems that candidates with no party affiliations, the independents, are locked in fierce battles in Busan and Gwangju. Now, Busan is a key conservative stronghold, whereas Gwangju is a key liberal stronghold. So how do we explain the phenomenon this time around?
Well, Gyeongyang political analysts say the independent candidates are getting support because the two cities feel the need to implement a sort of a system of checks and balances.
The people of Busan, they've been electing the Saenuri candidate in every presidential election in the past, and they feel as if that even despite their consistent support, the presidents from the Saenuri Party haven't really done enough for their region. And also pretty much the same thing in Gwangju.
However, in the city of Gwangju, voters are upset that MPAD co-leader An Cheol-soo decided to nominate Yoon Jang-hyun as his party's candidate without holding primaries.
We had the historic first early voting, and the turnout was really high. How is that expected to affect the results of tomorrow's all-important voting?
Well, the analysts are divided on that question. Professor Han Kyu-sub of Seoul National University said it could go both ways.
So we don't really know what it means. I mean, it could possibly mean that people who probably wouldn't have voted may have actually turned out, or it could just be the same people who would have voted anyway, even without this early vote.
But he did say it is likely that the young people will be supporting the opposition party and the older generation voting for the conservative ruling party.
Now, Myung-gil, we have been talking for weeks about the impact that the Seoul ferry disaster may have on the local elections. What do analysts say?
Well, Gyeongyang experts say last month's ferry disaster has definitely affected public sentiment and that the election will be seen as a referendum on the incumbent government.
So anyone who's an incumbent and as anyone who's running as a nominee of the opposition party, they'll have a certain advantage because of the disaster. Now it has truly become sort of a midterm evaluation of the President Park's performance in the past year and a half.
Well, after the campaigning comes champagning for some, heartbreak for others. How are the candidates managing their final hours of campaigning?
Well, Daniel, the official campaign period ends Tuesday evening at midnight. Candidates have been following through with their planned schedules, meeting up with citizens and hammering home their main election pledges, many of which centered on safety. In light of the ferry disaster, most candidates said they would focus their efforts in office on making the nation safer by reforming the local government safety management systems and boosting public safety regulations. While this year's election campaigns have especially been toned down due to the Seoul ferry accident, rival parties are making the most of their last-minute efforts to pull in as many votes as they can.
Well, they have a couple of hours left to make their last pitch and their last case to the voters. And we will all be watching for the election results tomorrow for signs of what kind of a statement that the voters will make with their ballots. Now, that was Kim Young reporting live on the June 4th local elections. Thank you.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gong-yong and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
For the first time, a U.S. official has spoken publicly about Washington's desire to deploy a U.S. missile defense system in South Korea. While you might think the move has North Korean threats in mind, analysts say it actually has more to do with China's rise. Here's our Kim Hyun-bin with this report.
The top commander for U.S. forces in Korea has asked Washington to deploy an advanced American missile defense system in Korea, a move that may push Seoul closer to joining Washington's missile defense system, along with Japan. Speaking at a lecture in Seoul on Tuesday, General Curtis Scaparrotti said he had recommended that the Pentagon set up the system known as a Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to Korea. Scaparrotti's comments are the first from a U.S. official that confirm it is looking into deploying its high-altitude defense shield on the peninsula. THAAD is a U.S.-led missile defense system capable of intercepting ballistic missiles at high altitudes of up to 150 kilometers in their terminal phase. Earlier reports said that Washington had conducted a site survey for possible deployment locations for the THAAD system. But is it a good fit for South Korea?
It's still too early to say that China is all against China's rising military power. We should focus on North Korea's direct missile system and its North Korea's very provocative actions, including the post-nuclear test and another series of missile tests.
Some experts say the U.S. is not using the system to prevent threats from Pyongyang, but rather to counter China's growing presence in the region.
THAAD is very controversial regarding the efficiency and adaptability and interoperability. A lot of concepts we should consider.
The recommendation is in the initial stages of consideration. General Scaparrotti said a final decision will come after close discussions between Korea and the U.S. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The chatter over a resumption of the six-party talks on North Korea's nuclear program has picked up in recent weeks. But the chief nuclear envoys of South Korea and the U.S. during their talks in Washington agreed that dialogue with Pyongyang will only begin once that regime shows it's ready to freeze its nuclear program. Our correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
South Korea and the United States agreed North Korea must not advance its nuclear capability if it seeks dialogue with them. Following 4 hours of talks in Washington on Monday local time, South Korea's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk and his U.S. counterpart Glenn Davies set a condition for the resumption of six-nation talks aimed at denuclearizing North Korea.
On resuming denuclearization talks, we agreed it must be a meaningful dialogue that ensures actual progress and prevents further development of North Korea's nuclear capacity.
The meeting comes a week after Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Seoul, where he called for a swift resumption of the six-party talks. The multilateral denuclearization dialogue involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, has been stalled since December 2008. Hwang said Seoul and Washington agreed North Korea's sincerity about denuclearization is the key precondition to resuming the six-party talks, and they will seek close consultation with Beijing on the issue. South Korea and the United States also called on Japan to maintain transparency in its discussions with North Korea. Pyongyang agreed last week to allow a reinvestigation into the fate of Japanese citizens abducted by the North in the 1970s and 80s, and Tokyo promised to lift some of its sanctions on the North. Experts say dialogue between North Korea and Japan is key for solving the abduction issue, but stress Tokyo must not stray away from its trilateral cooperation with Seoul and Washington in dealing with Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea repatriated a North Korean fisherman through the truce village of Panmunjom on Tuesday. This comes 3 days after he was picked up in a boat drifting off South Korea's eastern coast. The man in his 30s was among 3 men found on the fishing vessel. 2 others said they wanted to stay in the south, and Seoul's unification ministry says it will honor their request based on humanitarian grounds. Pyongyang had been demanding that all 3 men be repatriated. Korea's most wanted man may be looking for a way out of the country. The team in charge of tracking down Yoo Byung-un, the fugitive owner of the sunken Seoul ferry, says he recently asked an undisclosed country for political asylum. The nation reportedly denied the request after determining that Yoo did not meet the criteria. Prosecutors have called on Korea's foreign ministry to advise foreign missions here not to accept the 73-year-old man. An arrest warrant is out for Yoo, who is wanted on charges of embezzlement and tax evasion. Authorities have offered a $500,000 reward for information that leads to his capture.
Korea's largest conglomerate is taking another step toward restructuring, and this one is being seen as a move to speed up the succession of ownership from the group chairman to his children. Samsung Everland, the de facto holding company of Samsung Group, says it'll seek an initial public offering in the first quarter of 2015. Arirang News Hwang Ji-hye tells us what this means, especially when the 73-year-old chairman remains in the hospital after a heart attack last month.
Samsung Everland will go public by next March. The de facto holding company of Korea's biggest conglomerate, Samsung, said Tuesday that it plans an initial public offering as part of efforts to become a global fashion and service company. The move, however, is widely seen by analysts as the next step in the conglomerate's succession plan as it relates to Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Gun-hee's 3 children. Currently, his son Tae-yong holds the largest 25% stake in Samsung Everland, while his 2 daughters, Poo-jin and Seo-hyun, each hold around an 8.5% stake. Chairman Lee holds a mere 3.7%. Analysts say the listing of Samsung Everland will give the chairman's children means to generate cash by selling shares in the company. The cash could be used to help pay inheritance taxes and buy shares in companies they want to control.
Samsung Group would need a lot of transaction costs in order to pay necessary taxes, in order to swap necessary stakes from one entity to the other.
Questions linger about Samsung's future as the group's de facto chairman Lee Gun-hee was hospitalized last month after suffering a heart attack. Many predict that the electronics and financial sector will be handed over to Lee's only son Tae-yong, the chemical and hotel sectors to first daughter Poo-jin, and the fashion and media sectors to second daughter Seo-hyun. Samsung Everland is expected to lay out a detailed schedule and procedures for the listing later this month. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's exports, considered the nation's growth engine, of course, are being threatened by signs of an economic slowdown in China. China, of course, is Korea's biggest export market, and it's causing Korean exporters to scramble to adapt and policymakers to chip in where they can. Here's our Kim Ji-yeon.
Korean exports to China plunged 9.4% in May on year due to an economic slowdown in the world's second largest economy. It's setting off alarm bells for the Korean economy, whose growth is heavily export reliant. Exports to China make up the greatest share at a quarter of Korea's total exports. What's particularly worrying is that a large chunk of Korean exports to China are in the form of raw materials or parts that are manufactured or reprocessed in China for re-exports to other countries. China increasingly shifting focus to domestic consumption from exports for its growth. The proportion of intermediate trade based on reprocessing dropped to 25% last year from 39% 6 years earlier. This is why Kang Do-yong of the Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade highlights a need to expand the range of Korean goods exported to China.
One of the best ways for Korean exporters to weather the storm is to begin producing goods that can be sold in the Chinese local market, rather than goods that are merely used for reprocessing.
To help Korea's export companies respond to the changing landscape, Korea's Trade Ministry is planning to step in. They plan to promote more marketing and export exhibitions through related organizations like the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
More economy news. The jitters over an economic slowdown in China may be a bit premature. Recent data suggests that the nation's factory and service sectors powered back in May with their best showings in months. The nation's PMI rose to a 4-month high of 49.4 in May. Analysts say it's a sign that the economy is recovering its footing after a slow start to the year. Concerned about the sluggish growth, Chinese authorities have been accelerating infrastructure investment and state spending and have lowered the reserve requirements for some banks twice. Tuesday's data appears to show that the measures are having the desired effect. Korea's consumer inflation grew at its fastest rate in over a year and a half in May. Statistics Korea says the consumer price index spiked 1.7% from a year earlier, and officials attribute the rise to a low base effect, saying agricultural products saw a steep decline in the same month last year. The price index, excluding items that are vulnerable to external uncertainties, such as agricultural and petroleum products, rose 2.2% on year, still below the central bank's target inflation rate of 2.5% to 3.5%. Prices of electricity and water jumped more than 4% on year, while agricultural and fisheries product prices edged down 2%.
Well, for decades, U.S. climate change policy amounted to the hypocrisy often associated with bad parenting. Do as I say, not as I do.
Well, that's about to change, actually. Or did it begin to change on Monday when the Obama administration announced its boldest step yet to reduce the nation's carbon emission from power plants? Here's our Chae Yu-sun with more.
But today EPA is proposing a clean power plan that will cut carbon pollution from our power sector by using clean energy sources and cutting energy waste.
The Obama administration's new plan requires America's 1,000 power plants to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions to 30% of 2005 levels by the year 2030. Nearly 2/5 of electricity in the U.S. is generated by coal-fueled plants. Each U.S. state has a number of ways to achieve this. They can increase their power plants' heat rates, rely more on natural gas or other sources for energy, and raise energy efficiency. The Environmental Protection Agency says more than $90 billion of climate and health-related costs will be saved from the plan, and up to 150,000 asthma attacks in children and over 3,000 heart attacks could be prevented.
Often these illnesses are aggravated by air pollution. Pollution from the same sources that release carbon and contribute to climate change. We've got to do more to reduce it.
Despite the government's assurances that the new rules will bring down electricity bills by 8% and encourage investment in new technologies, business groups and lawmakers from coal-reliant states oppose the initiative.
The administration has set out to kill coal and its 800,000 jobs. If it succeeds in death by regulation, we'll all be paying a lot more money for electricity.
After a period of public comment, the regulations will be finalized in June of next year, after which states can submit their own carbon reduction plans. Chae Yu-sun, Arirang News.
And the Korean cabinet has also made a move. It's given the green light to an ambitious plan to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions. The 5-year Green Growth Plan approved today seeks to reduce carbon emissions from the industrial sector by more than 56 million tons by 2018, and starting this year when the target is 6.2 million tons.
And to accomplish the goals, a shift toward liquefied natural gas will be promoted within the refinery and steel industries. 200,000 electric vehicles will also be provided to cities across the nation by the year 2020, and railway systems will be expanded. Korea is currently the world's 7th worst offender in terms of greenhouse gas emissions.
Well, it's been a rainy Wednesday or Tuesday here in Korea, and let's get a check on the forecast by turning to Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle, if you know me, I like rain, so how long can I expect this rain to last?
Well, the rain will stop very soon in the central region, while the rest of the nation can expect it up to until tomorrow.
As Konyang just accidentally predicted, is it going to be a rainy Wednesday election day then?
Well, most of the rain should stop by the morning, which shouldn't have much of an effect on the voting, except for those of you in the southern regions where heavy rain is expected until tomorrow. Now, the daytime highs are expected to rise back up into the high 20s tomorrow, mainly in the central region. For the rest of the week, it's going to be a cloudy day nationwide with a cool breeze in the air. So even though the temperatures will be in the 20s, it won't be hot as the recent weeks. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will start off the morning at 20 and going up to 29 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will both peak at 22 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 25, Dokdo at 22, while Mankumgang tops out at 20. Well, that's all for me at this hour. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Michelle. And that's it for us. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, have a wonderful rest of the evening. This has been Daniel Chen.
And I'm Moon Ganyang. To those of you in other parts of the world, have a great start to your day. And we hope to see you right back here same time tomorrow with a special election coverage here at Arirang News. Bye-bye.